My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Hi, I'm Shelley Trask. Today's leadership quote comes from Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
Check out my dad's book at leaderassistantbook.com. Welcome to episode 65.
Hey, Leader Assistants, we're 1 week away from book launch, so I'm very excited to launch worldwide on June 23rd. I'm going to do the Kindle version on Amazon for only 99 cents. Be sure to check that out next week. I've got a live event with Monique Hellstrom on book launch day, June 23rd. You can register at leaderassistantbook.com/events to join us. We're going to have a little online launch party and do some giveaways and do a little bit of Q&A and just have some fun doing a live webinar with Monique Hellstrom. Monique is a former Chief Executive Assistant to Simon Sinek. She's been on the show before, so you've probably heard her, and she also wrote the foreword to the book. So I'm very thankful for her doing that and just very excited to have her join me on launch day on June 23rd for a live book launch party event, leaderassistantbook.com/events. And if you haven't yet, you can download the first 3 chapters for free while you're waiting for the complete book to come out, leaderassistantbook.com. All right, let's jump into today's interview. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for all your support, and I'll be in touch next week for book launch. Hello, welcome to the Leader Assistant Podcast. It's your host, Jeremy Burrows, and today I'm speaking with Shelley Trask from Slack. She's the Executive Assistant to the CTO. How's it going, Shelley?
It's going well. Thank you, Jeremy, for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, and you're in California, right?
That's correct. Nice and overcast today.
So at least the temperature is above freezing.
This is true.
Awesome. Well, what was your very first job? And what skills did you learn in that role that you still use today?
This is a great question for me. My first job, I was 17, which is a little old to start your first job, but I was busy making art. My mother marched me into a discount linen store called Stroud's, which has since closed. And she told the person at the desk that her daughter would very much like to apply for this role, to which I said, what? And I sort of wish my mom had marched me into an office instead of a discount linen store, but I started there. I was made a manager within 3 months. It was a total catastrophe of a company. As far as like working there within retail, it's something that I look for people who have also worked in retail to see if you could do that, you could do anything. I managed mostly women, many of whom were ages 40 to 75. I was 17. It was tough to earn their respect at that age, and I had to work really hard for that. The job was really painful. It was shoving really heavy bed-in-a-bags. I don't know if you know, it's a comforter, a sheet set, some other things all in one giant bag. And I had to shove them over my head all day long up into the shelving, and then folding hundreds of washcloths. So then we do that. We do folding washcloths all day, and then we would just watch someone knock it all down in one swoop.
Yeah.
So I think we can all agree, retail, hard. The things I learned, though, I learned resiliency, I learned determination, and I learned management, because there's nothing harder than managing at 17 when you're still being managed at home by other people. And those were really good skills. And I honestly still think about it. My first boss, her name was Rosalind Kaysen. Hi, Roz, if you're out there. And I think about her a lot. She was a tough, tough lady.
So, folding all those towels and washcloths and putting them on the shelf, it's kind of like when you schedule a whole bunch of meetings and then your executive walks in and knocks all the towels off the shelf.
It's exactly like it. I mean, it all travels to current work for me. I remember what it feels like. That's why when people get really upset when things change at work, I say, hey, this is literally our job. You just do things and things change and you have to be able to go with the flow.
Yeah, definitely. So when and why did you become an assistant?
So I did the retail for a year and a half, obviously quick to get out of that, went to administrative roles, recognizing my skill set was very much computers, software, organization, and that's kind of my personality type. I worked in an advertising agency. I did 10 years at an environmental consulting agency in Berkeley when I first landed in the Bay Area in 2002. And then 10 years later, all of my friends were working at startups. They were making a lot more money and really seemed to be happy. They were getting free lunches. They were getting all these perks. And I thought, 10 years is a good run. So I went in 2012. I officially changed my title from office manager to executive assistant, and recognizing that I had actually been doing that job for all this time, but didn't really know about that role, didn't know it made more money, didn't know I could get more prestige and respect. And so I started at a company called Livefire, and they were acquired by Adobe, I believe in 2014. I lasted there for about 2 years and went on to do other things.
So what do you love about the role?
I love the autonomy. I love I get to be very close to the top level of every company I'm in without having to be the C-level executive. And I think as many of us who work closely with them, we often probably say, I'm really glad that's not my job. I'm really happy to be a supporting character, to be the person behind the curtain. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want to travel the world constantly. But I love making it happen and making it happen really seamlessly for them. There's just a lot of joy. The devil is in the details is something I say a lot because I'm a very detail-oriented person. And actually that's one of my weaknesses is I often have to take a step back. And I rely on my coworkers who have strengths in sort of the bigger picture stuff. I always say, remind me if I'm thinking too micro here when I need to get bigger.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's an amazing role. This role didn't exist. We had secretaries, we've had office management, and in the end we were, I think part of it that allowed the power to build and the real relationships to build is the respect for the role and the understanding of the value that this role provides.
Awesome. So tell us about one of the bigger mistakes you've made, and maybe specifically in one of the startup environments.
Yeah. So I have one personal, one professional. So personally, I think not leaving a boss when I know that the boss isn't a really good fit for me, or that I'm not going to learn anything more from working with this person or from working at the company. So something like if the company doesn't really understand what the role is, I think, I probably should have left earlier. Professionally, I did something really stupid. It's a very minor thing, but I once did a really dumb thing when making duplicates of calendar invitations in GCal. My company was trying to court multiple companies for an acquisition, and I was rapid fire sending out meeting invites that were really, really detailed. So I wanted to avoid recreating the wheel each time, but I once accidentally had the wrong name in an invite, and that was not cool. Luckily, the recipient didn't figure it out, and it turned out fine. But just a reminder, even if you think you're type A, you think you're perfect, you need to check your work 3 times.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
So what's maybe a productivity hack that you can't live without?
So when I was in the world of Gmail, which was most of my career, I couldn't live without Boomerang. I needed Boomerang. So if I'm writing to somebody and I'm waiting for them to respond, I would always have a Boomerang so that my boss wouldn't say, hey, did you ever get that meeting scheduled? The other one was the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which used to be called Reportive. It is a really great way. It's a plugin. It's a really great way for you to see who you're writing to so that you can address the gender properly. I would write to a lot of people whose names I couldn't tell if it was, ma'am, sir. And it was really kind of intimidating. It's like, oh my gosh, if I get this wrong, and then of course, if you're working with Japan, that's a whole other level. So the LinkedIn Sales Navigator is great. And then as far as working at Slack, there are a ton of tips like, marking unread, saving to Slackbot to remind you later. There's a lot of ways to prioritize your sort of workflow in Slack.
So let's talk about Slack a little bit. why don't you all use email internally?
Well, once you stop using email, you will understand why. At first, it's like, whoa, this is very strange. I loved email. I thought I was the master of Gmail. I had all my labels. I had time zones. Now I find it really painful to email. I'm really bad. My inbox is a hot mess, and it used to be inbox zero, but we don't use it internally at all because the product actually completely replaces the use of email at Slack. So we do use email externally. I do need to talk with candidates externally. I do, if I'm going to schedule a meeting for my boss, I will obviously reach out via email, but then I try to move it into Slack as quickly as I can. So we actually have a plugin that allows me to forward emails from my inbox into Slack. So if I want my boss to see an email, I actually just forward it to him in Slack, and he doesn't ever have to go into his inbox because he doesn't at all use email. We also have a really cool feature that allows an external party to email me, and I can reply to them from within Slack, and they think that I'm emailing them. So it just looks like email to them. We can go back and forth, and I won't need to use email, but they have the option to join a shared channel with me in Slack. And a shared channel is a term for basically I have a channel with, for instance, you, and you're not a part of the company, but we have a private channel together. So it's something you can use for vendors or for kind of one-offs like travel agents.
So I'm personally a fan of email, and I like Slack when it comes to communities, like online communities, kind of forum type format.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time with Slack in the sense of people pinging you all day. It feels like people texting you all day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like how it's organized. And I have a hard time organizing it the way that my brain works. So what would you say to people like me that are listening that are kind of in the same boat where they're like, I like email, I like the order that, the visual order that it's in. How have you kind of helped people embrace Slack?
That's a great question, because obviously when I started here, I had not used Slack very much. I'd used it very casually, the way that you're describing, for DMs at my last company. Basically, if there's a visitor, I'd say, hey, your visitor's here, and that would be a Slack message. But that was really the depth of usage. So when you join Slack, the company, you are in for a wild ride. Our onboarding is 2.5 days. It's a very intensive onboarding. I've heard it's phenomenal. And then on top of that, if you're an admin, the admin team will then onboard you for another, rest of the week. And then obviously we give you a little bit more time to acclimate, because you have to learn how to use the software. So I think that one of the things you're bringing up about it being sort of not easy for you, I think that the number one thing is you have to learn the shortcut keys and you have to learn the shortcuts. So knowing that you can find any channel by its name by pushing Command K, and it brings up a little finder box. Basically, you just start typing and then all of the channels pop up. I do everything in shortcuts all day. And when you retrain your brain with these shortcuts, everything you do is infinitely faster. I don't think people are always optimizing for shortcuts. And that includes in Gmail too. Like the Google products have wonderful shortcuts as well that a lot of people don't use. So number one, like, get to know your shortcuts. You won't have to look for anything because you just use the search command. You can also do things like marking unread. As far as being interrupted by a bunch of DMs, kind of the way you're feeling like whack-a-mole, what I do is, I look at urgent DMs from people depending on who they are. It's obviously something from my boss, might be priority over someone who's like 4 levels down. I also can mark them unread, or I can have them remind me tomorrow to ping that person, which is great. So it's kind of like, for me, the Slackbot feature is the same as Boomerang in Gmail. So really learning how to use that Slackbot. And Slackbot has a feature in the last, I'm not sure how many months, but we've integrated it so that you can say, remind me to, in exactly 9 a.m. in 3 days to ping Jeremy. So it's a little more dialed in, just like Boomerang is. The other one is, I'm looking at urgent DMs, I'm looking at responses in threads, and I'm looking at updates that are high priority channels. And that's where my attention is focused. So I think one of the issues people have when they start using Slack is learning how to focus their attention in the right places. I first started here and I was looking at every single bolded channel thinking that it was something I needed to read, but it's not the same as having a notification, which is a number symbol, right, over one of your channels.
Mm-hmm.
So just like really learning the product. And we have amazing training online for free. There's a blog, there's all kinds of written documentation. And I actually have a channel where I teach people as well.
So I've learned things like, okay, I'm going to star the VIPs that I have to talk to all the time because I'd rather just go click their name versus trying to do a keyboard shortcut or type in their name and have to find the direct message. But then I've also done things like I mute a bunch of channels, but they, so that they don't come up in a bold white notification, but they do show up when there's something unread, but it's not as urgent feeling.
Right.
So I do like those kinds of things. I think my biggest thought, and I wonder if you have like a hack for this, my biggest thing, the reason I like email is I like to see things in order of basically when they're received. And I have a hard time organizing my Slack in that way. So because I just always feel like I'm jumping around and I'm like, I would just like to go through in order of received.
Yeah, I understand that actually, because I do like that about email as well, because you have the sorting feature as well. I do think that there are some things that our product will be improved upon to look forward to in the future as far as sorting and being able to take a little bit more control over the channels and the way that you look at them. So I'm looking forward to that. But I do think, I guess because I'm so current on Slack and up to date, I'm not concerned with exactly what time something was sent because I'm usually looking at it. But I guess if you're a casual user and you're using it for like a social group, I could see that. And then the other thing I really want to stress is I also think one of the reasons people don't enjoy using Slack when they first start is that others are not threading properly. So your Slack page, your channel should not look like a bunch of discussions.
Right.
It should look like a topic and then threading, another topic and then threading. And if people aren't willing to make that commitment to each other to use it correctly, it's really hard to read. I've looked at other people's Slacks and just can't believe what it looks like. It's impossible at that point. So I think there's some best practices to establish as well.
Yeah, and I agree, and I feel the same way about looking at other people's inboxes. Just like, whoa, how do you even? Or sometimes I'm like, maybe that's why you're not getting anything done.
Yeah, or I think, wow, you must be a master searcher. That must be your strength. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. So what is it like working for fast-growing, large company, and that a lot of people have heard of, a lot of people use? What are there kind of some pros and cons to being in a company like that?
Definitely. It's incredibly exciting. And Slack was definitely, probably the only company I had heard of that I joined, before joining. When I saw the job opening, I thought to myself, wow, I don't know, like that's a company I'd really like to work for. That's pretty intimidating. I don't even know if I could get in there because I haven't worked at a company that big. So we grew from 1,000 people to around 2,000 people in under the 2 years I've been here. It's been really hyper growth for a long time. And our admin team has grown from around 8 people to 24 people now. My engineering admin team alone has grown from just me to 8 people. But I love working here. It's number one, Slack is the friendliest company you could ever work for. People are genuinely excited that you're here and they care about you and what you have to say. First workplace, it is a kind workplace. We are, I think, thoughtful before we say things, like take a minute, think about what you're going to say. Does it really affect people appropriately? Even as we've grown so quickly, we've managed to maintain that. And I think another thing that is kind of because the software we make and use every day has such visibility and transparency, there's a transparency to the company that is built into that. So you see a lot of what is being written in channels that are social channels, that are work channels. You see the way your coworkers are writing and what they're talking about. And it alone, like by being able to see what people are saying and comment on it and people reacting to what you say, it creates a camaraderie as well at Slack.
So how have you navigated your own career growth in the midst of the overall company doubling in size?
Yeah, obviously, the growth of the company is directly tied to my ability to grow as an EA. And that's something that I've been seeking for a long time in my career. I've worked at smaller companies, really startups that were 40, that got really up to 200 max. And I often felt like after a few years, I'd maxed out my ability to really tackle big problems and create new processes, which is my favorite thing to do, is to come in and fix things and figure out how to make them better. Working at a fast-growing company means that I have yet to run out of interesting problems or solve or things to improve upon. So basically, every day there's a new challenge here. One example recently that I'm really proud of is our admin career path. When I started, we had a career ladder that was recently adopted, and in reading it, a lot of us were sort of like, well, I don't know that this applies to me in my career here. It was very opaque. And when we'd have career conversations, our bosses would say, I don't really know how to figure out where you are on this ladder. And so a small group of us recently completely rewrote and recalibrated our path based on our company values and the strengths and qualities that we believe successful admins possess to be valuable players here. The path is, it's actually being passed through HR to our principals for adoption, I think today. So that's a really good feeling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what are the company values?
So our company values are smart, humble, hardworking, and collaborative. And we mapped the values to job knowledge is smart, communication is collaborative, business and org impact is hardworking, and communication is collaborative.
Nice.
Did I get all of that? Yeah. So it was pretty fun to do. It took a lot of work.
So this kind of segues to the next question. What should assistants be doing to advocate for themselves when it comes to responsibilities, compensation, and respect? So you talk about, hey, we've kind of redone the career path for the admin team. What are some other things that assistants can do to advocate for themselves?
So I hear a lot about people feeling like they're not getting the respect that they deserve at their job. And I want to make sure that they're earning the respect as well. I would say, first, make sure that you work at a company that recognizes what you do and the value that you provide. Like, do they understand the role when you're being hired? If you're interviewing with them and they're bickering about what the role is, that's a good way to step out of that interview. I've actually left an interview before where people didn't agree what the role was. Second, make sure that you represent that value. So be professional. Go that extra mile to make your work look beautiful, fix the spelling errors, refine the presentation, make yourself invaluable and a key player, proactively tackle projects. Don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. That's number one way to earn respect, and to advocate for yourself. Once you continue to provide that value, you should be able to create a case for yourself for compensation. Keep track of your major milestones and have career conversations often with your manager. If your manager isn't great at it, because let's face it, executives often are not good managers. They're wonderful executives. And to be really successful as an admin, I think you need to be your own self-advocate. Get to know their chief of staff, get to know your HR business partners, your manager's peers as well. Make sure that they know the value that you deliver. Don't be shy. I have another EA here who always reminds me of what someone once told her. She says, you are in the business of you. That is it. That is your business. So if you're not reflecting, your own image upon the world, like, you're not doing the job. You're not here for anybody else. That being said, of course, you are also here for your company.
Right.
But I would also say respect comes naturally when you're being professional, when people see you working hard, and also delegating when you should delegate, because there's respect around that as well. Don't be a martyr. Don't kill yourself if you don't have to. Being clear about expectations on what you can deliver, having strong communication, both verbal and written skills, all of that creates respect. And if you're doing all of this and you're not getting anywhere, it's time to leave. We've all been there. I've had my own regrets that I didn't leave certain situations sooner, but in the end, you have your own path. You have to trust your instincts.
So could you talk about your team? So how did you grow the EA team, and do you have any tips for interviewing?
Yeah, actually, another project we did was we wrote up new interview questions.
Nice.
So I try to reach out to my networks, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm also a member of an administrative group called org, which is a free group that anybody can join. Very, very valuable and helpful. We historically at Slack, we've used recruiting agencies to help us find high caliber candidates here. But I'm also not afraid to go on LinkedIn and cold email someone. I've made connections this way, even if I don't get a hire out of it. It's kind of a long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. And interview tips, I love this one. So another EA here, I think it was her husband who asked this question. So we have a question now that we use, which is, what's your zombie apocalypse plan? It's so good. There is no right answer. I'm looking for what your face says when I ask you this question. Are you funny? Can you be funny? Can you come up with anything on the spot, which is our job really anyways? Like, you have to figure out things on the spot. That's the whole question. And people who get kind of thrown by it, this is about improv, you know, being a good A is the art of improv.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I like the zombie question. I love apocalyptic shows and movies and thinking about end of the world scenarios and prepping for my end of the world scenario. Maybe that's why I'm a decent EA.
Of course.
My wife's always like, why? Like, no, I don't know why you think like that. And I'm like, well, somebody's got to be prepared if it happens.
I do think that's an EA thing.
Awesome. Well, Shelley, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to share tips and tricks and a little bit of your story. I'm going to close the interview with one of my favorite questions. What makes an assistant a leader?
You're a leader by design. I mean, you are truly leading the pack in your role and supporting your executive properly. You are a leader because people see you leading. I think that respect is tied in with that as well. And you lead by example. So you're leading not only your company, but you're leading the people who you hire to work with you on your team by example.
Awesome.
I have one more thing I would say to go with that. I would say, do great work, be appropriately assertive, speak up when you have good ideas, fight against injustice for both yourself and your coworkers. Don't be an asshole. Tackle problems even if you might not get credit for it, or if people will not know who did it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like when we started our company, one of our, there was 6 of us at day one, and I think it was probably that day we talked about, can we make it a rule not to hire assholes?
Yeah. That's definitely one of our rules at Slack. Don't hire assholes. And if you notice one, say it. Like, say something.
Awesome. Well, is there somewhere we can find you online or support what you're doing?
Unfortunately, I don't have much of an online presence. I have a website that I probably should do something with someday, but for now, LinkedIn. Definitely find me in the org. I'm a volunteer for org. I run a Slack workspace, training people on how to use Slack and all the best practices, much more than I've discussed here. So I very much invite you to join that workspace through the org website. But I look forward to joining more and doing more good work for other admin occasions.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Shelley. Keep up your good work with Slack and your EA teams. Yeah, it's fun to see you all grow and get kind of help companies and help communities connect and get out of email.
Yeah, I promise we'll get you there someday.
We'll see.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you again, Shelley, for a great interview. Episode 65's show notes are at leaderassistant.com/65. And again, the book comes out in a little over a week. So leaderassistantbook.com/events to join Monique Hellstrom and I for a launch party on June 23rd. Talk to you next time.
Please review on Apple Podcasts. GoBulls.com